Thank you for your enthusiastic response to Restoring Health Holistically. I would just like to make clear that I am not a medical practitioner. In order to heal my own illness over the past 17 years, I've become a holistic health author, educator, and an advocate. But this does not provide the depth of knowledge that's needed to treat illnesses. I research any illness I have, and then I make an appointment with a holistically trained practitioner to discuss a treatment plan. And this is a collaboration between you and your doctor. Western medicine primarily treats symptoms with drugs forever. I prefer to seek practitioners who are trained to treat the causes of illness so that I will get well. The titles that I look for are naturopathic doctor, or ND, functional MDs, orthomolecular doctors, chiropractic neurologists, and certified energy medicine practitioners. These TV shows are intended to raise consumer awareness of holistic treatments and explain how they work so that you can make informed decisions and find a practitioner to work with and get well. Thank you. Good evening. I'm Gracelyn Guyol, and welcome to a different episode of Restoring Health Holistically. For the past 3 years, you've been watching me interview different holistic health practitioners in this series. So this summer, what I decided to do is do 2 one-hour specials in the hopes that, for 2 things. That you will, if you've enjoyed this series, that you will consider making a contribution to SEC TV that has hosted and made all of this possible and allowed me to bring you information about how you can help get well and using holistic medicine. And the other part was that I wanted to ask you to make a donation to this station, and some of the viewers had said they really would like to know more about me, since I've always asked all the questions. So this evening, we decided to let a friend of mine, Lois Arias, ask me the questions and let you get acquainted with me. And we posted it on Facebook so that you could submit questions, and they're not restricted to questions about me personally. You can ask about personal health issues if you wanted to. This is being taped, though, so you can't ask them now. And we hope that this will prove to be so popular that we'll do it again next year as a fundraiser for the station. So allow me to introduce you to my friend Lois, and welcome. She has a background in television, and I'll let her tell you what she's doing these days.
I was fortunate enough to meet Gracelyn and become the administrator of her Facebook page. If you're not on there just for the personal page, there is an area for professional. So my most recent challenge has been trying to get everyone from the first page onto the new page. We will continue trying that. I'm very excited about this special because several people had said to me that they wanted to know more about her and all of the good work she's seen. And I've seen that you've done with other people.
Mm-hmm. Sure. Well, now is your chance to ask me what's on your mind and what's on their minds that they've told you from Facebook. So why don't we get started?
Okay, I'm going to throw this one in before we get to these.
Okay.
And that's, I understand that you're hoping to open up a holistic institute, and I'm wondering if you could tell us a little about it.
Yes, it's in the planning stages, and some say the hoping stages, but it's a little more beyond that at this stage. I have the
most frequently asked question of people who read my books is how help me find a practitioner. I've been a holistic practitioner. I haven't been able to find one. And as I grappled with helping people around the world literally find holistic mental health practitioners, I realized that there aren't very many of them. And I started doing some research. And I discovered it's not just holistic mental health practitioners. 82% of Americans cannot find a mental health practitioner to help them. And that's because a lot of them live in areas where they're underserved. There's between 80 and 117 million mentally ill people in the United States. That's an estimate from the National Institute of Health. And there's only 156,000 mental health practitioners in this whole country. So people are not able to find a practitioner near where they live in certain areas. And of those 80% who can't find a practitioner, 40% of them can't afford the treatment if they find one. And so this made me realize that the real challenge is to get more practitioners interested in doing mental health service, and to then try and make it more available. So the Holistic Mental Health Institute and Clinic will be a model for what we hope to use as increasing the number of practitioners in this country, and especially those that know how to treat holistically, and creating enough demand for the services that we will be able to see more practitioners entering this service as a result of this work. So it's in the planning stages. 2016 will be the earliest that we might open this somewhere in Connecticut. And right now I'm looking for funding. So if you know somebody who has a lot of money they want to throw at me, I'm open to that. So thank you.
We'll look for that.
All right.
Okay, the first question we have here is, your mother was also bipolar. How did you feel about this as a child? And explain what people can do if they have inherited a tendency for depression, bipolar, or other diagnoses.
Okay. Yes. My mother was not diagnosed until she was 70 years old. So throughout my childhood, nobody knew that my mother was bipolar. We just knew that sometimes she did really crazy things, that nobody could understand why this seemingly normal woman would do some of the things that she did. She would run away from time to time, and she would order a roofer to come and roof the house when there was no money to roof the house. So it drove my father crazy. He would admit that he was crazy, and we didn't know that really she was the one that had the disorder. And it created, and as I work with people with mental illnesses and experienced bipolar myself, what happens with mental illness is that those who are sick and not diagnosed, it just makes them seem selfish, unwilling to be cooperative. It creates dysfunctional families. It creates anger and unhappiness and lots of money spent that wasn't available. So it's part of a dysfunctional family. And when you have one person in the family who has a mental illness, chances are in the next generation you will have another one. And so it gets passed down, and so you have some very unhappy, dysfunctional families, and they don't know why, because maybe nobody's ever been diagnosed. And so one of the things that that I try to do through my books and the TV shows and through the Institute next is make people understand that there is inherited mental disorders have been well established since the 1960s. And there are 4 inherited conditions that were documented by Canadian doctors in a inpatient mental hospital in Canada in the 1960s. And the doctor who was running it was Dr. Abraham Hoffer, and I refer to some of his work. He's written, I know it's over 20 and it may be even 40 books, I can't recall, but he lived into his 90s, and so he developed ways of testing for very common inherited disorders that contribute to all mental illnesses, not just bipolar, not just depression, but to Alzheimer's, to autism, to schizophrenia. And when I was diagnosed, I had 2 of the 4. And now they have one lab test that costs $200 to test for all 4 of them. And it's a lab test, so if you have insurance, they should pay for it. And it quickly tells you the 4 inherited errors, and I'm not going to try to explain in detail, but I'll give you the names of the 4, and the explanations are in both of my books, because these are really important. If you have mental illness in your family, you really want to know about this, because I had 2 of the 4, and when the clinic that I went to outside of Chicago 12 years ago, they quickly tested me, and I had 2 of the 4, and when they started treating me for those 2, my mania disappeared in 4 months. The symptoms, the cycles of manic highs and depressive lows stopped, and it took a while longer to figure out what was causing my depression. But when I started taking therapeutic levels, new research came out of Harvard, I started taking therapeutic levels of fish oils, and within 48 hours, my depression lifted, because the cause of it was a deficiency in these essential fatty acids that everybody's brain needs to work right, but that you cannot get, your body can't make these. You can only get them through diet. So the Institute is an extension of the work that I've been doing for the last 17 years of healing everything holistically. But this is something that you can do if you have mental illness in your family. You can order this lab test, and it's, I'll give you one of the websites. There's a similar test on 2 or 3 different lab websites, but the one that I have in my book is called pyroluria-testing.com. That's www.pyroluria testing.com. And it's also on page 33 of my book, Who's Crazy Here, if you happen to have that in your home. So if you have a dysfunctional family, and you've had a dysfunctional extended family for years, you might consider having the ones who are most dysfunctional tested for these disorders. They are easy. Even though they're inherited, they're easily treated with specific natural supplements that counteract this deficiency in your body. And so there is hope to get well through simply knowing that you have this.
Excellent answer.
Next question.
An excellent answer. How did you do in school?
Learning was really easy for me. I love to read because being bipolar, I'm always easily bored. I need a lot of stimulation to keep me interested in life, and so I became an avid reader because I was easily bored and I lived on a farm. I dove into books as a way of escaping and entertaining myself. And so that reading habit stuck with me. And I did well in school, except sometimes I had a really faulty memory, and I didn't know why. I didn't know that everybody didn't have a faulty memory. I'd study for a test, I'd do well on the test, but 6 months later, I wouldn't be able to recall any of the material that I had learned for that test. So I couldn't go back very far. And what I learned is that through my healing of myself many years later, was that because one of the inherited deficiencies inherited disorders I had stripped my body of vitamin B6 and zinc. Vitamin B6 is important for the body, the brain, to take memories and take them from short-term memory into your long-term memory. And so I can learn things and retain them for a short period of time, but the details often don't get transplanted or transferred into my long-term memory. So for that reason, I never took classes in school or in college like chemistry that required memorization of a lot of details, because it wouldn't stick. Not reliably. I might remember half of it, or maybe not. And I never knew when. So I did well in school because of a good short-term memory, but I was careful about the career path that I took because I knew I didn't have a great long-term memory for detail.
Do you use energy medicine, i.e. acupuncture, hands-on healing, sound, and light therapy?
Yes. As I was trying to heal myself in 2004, 2005, I started, for those of you who haven't read about me, I started down this path because I was not diagnosed as bipolar until my mid-40s. And then didn't know anything about holistic medicine, and so I was prescribed a antidepressant, Wellbutrin. My mother, by that time, had been diagnosed, and she had taken lithium. And I observed from her experience that it didn't help her that much, and it had a lot of really horrible side effects. So I refused lithium sort of up front, and then took Wellbutrin. And it seemed to help at first. My life was less chaotic, and I seemed to be a little more stable, so I just continued taking it. But within a year, I started growing breast cysts and tumors so rapidly. I had surgery twice in 12 months. And through a 2-year process of eliminating anything that might cause cells to mutate and become cancerous, I finally began to suspect the drug. And so I tapered off the drug, and within 2 months, my latest tumor disappeared and all the new growth stopped. And so it was really clear that the drug had been the trigger because of the timing of when these had appeared and how rapidly it appeared, and then having one disappear was sort of the real deal. So I decided that after more research, that I wasn't going to take any of the psychiatric meds, and that I would give myself 2 years to find non-drug solutions to this illness. I felt if I could stop the growth of cancer, perhaps I could figure out what was causing my mood swings, and that I would be able to stop them. And in fact, I was able to, with the help of practitioners, holistic practitioners, and clinics over a 2-year period. So my bipolar symptoms ended in 2002, and I have been very stable since then. And I decided that it was really important that other people know this is possible, and that they would have hope to recover. And so my first book was Healing Depression and Bipolar Disorder Without Drugs. That came out in 2006. Practitioners loved it. I lectured to doctors across the country, 7-hour lectures. It took me a few more months of research to prepare, since I skipped chemistry in high school. And so doctors loved it. Patients, even though it was written in layman's language, said, we have a hard time, we have attention deficit. We have a hard time reading long books, so can you just tell us the steps to take to get better without all the science? And so I wrote, Who's Crazy Here? And the answer to that is, the industry is, if they think any pill is going to stop mental illness, that's not how it works. Every mental illness has multiple causes, and the only way you're going to stop them is to figure out those causes and address them. And so that book covered steps to recovery for 9 different mental diagnosis, in 117 pages. So it's the shortest quickest way I could tell people what to do, but one of those steps is find a holistic practitioner, because if you don't want to or can't understand the science of it, you need someone who does to guide you. So I determined at that point, when I started out, that I would use anything that wasn't a drug or that didn't damage my body to try and see if I could heal myself. And so I used energy medicine, and I used a variety of anything that I thought might hold promise. And I also do meditation and do yoga to help me be calm and stay calmer, and even when there's something exciting going on, and to stay focused. So I think these are really valuable treatments that are underestimated.
Okay, I'm interjecting a question that has to do with this, and that question is, are there holistic options the poor can use? Insurance would kill me with their meds, but I can't afford natural treatments.
There are things that you can do. It depends on the severity of your symptoms. What I start out with in my books is I tell the people, I outline the things that people should do for any mental illness. And that's number one, clean up your diet. The American diet is called the SAD diet, Standard American Diet, and it's really sad. It has practically no nutrition left in it. So you really need to work with a nutritionist or get a book and read about how to maximize the fuel that you're giving your brain. The brain uses 20% of your energy. It is the most fuel-intensive organ that you have. And so if you eat junk food and you don't get any nutrition, then your brain is going to run out of fuel. And it's like putting sugar water in your car and then being surprised that it can't run very well, or it stops and crashes. So first, that's the simplest thing. Everybody has to eat. Even if you're poor, you have to eat. Grow what you can. Buy the best quality food that you can. Go to farmers markets where you're not paying for a lot of advertising and a lot of transportation in your food costs. Do the best you can do, but make diet your foundation of health, and then eliminate all the toxins from your intake. I was a single mom and working, and I learned that if I cut out the junk food from my grocery shopping, I could afford a lot of fresh fruits and vegetables if I didn't get the the boxed cereals and the potato chips and the sodas and all of the empty calorie foods. So spend your money on what I call nutrient-dense foods, foods that are in the produce area. They're fresh, they're still alive, and they will feed your brain best. And then get the best quality meats that you can, and use local providers whenever possible.
And avoid GMOs, I imagine.
GMOs and chemicals, anything that's synthetic, anything that's processed. This is bad stuff. Your body doesn't know what to do with it. It does the best it can, but especially if you are poor and you don't have a lot of resources, spend them wisely on things that have a lot of nutrition. And if you can afford it, take a multivitamin. That I call supplements insurance. If you're not getting all of the elements that your body needs to function, then a multivitamin fills in for what you're not getting and helps a lot. So, and last thing for this question, exercise every day. The human body evolved moving. And part of what's the problem with our brain is if you don't exercise, you don't get enough oxygen flow to your brain. And so it's sitting there and is sort of half asleep because it's not getting enough oxygen. So the best antidepressant that I found when I was battling horrible depression in the middle of winter in Michigan, where I grew up, was if I would walk for an hour every day, my brain worked so much better and I felt so much better. And so there are things that you can do that are free, and exercise is one of them. And if you do it, some of it every day, that will help your brain and your health more than anything, almost anything except food. Okay?
That's a great answer. Why is autism becoming so common?
I'm glad somebody asked that, because this is what a lot of people ask me this all the time. Is it just because doctors are diagnosing it better? And the answer is no. The answer is, go back to World War II. When they were testing chemicals, possible nerve gases for use near the end of World War II, they discovered in the testing that these nerve gases killed bugs really fast. And so when the war ended, they took these nerve gases and converted them, and they became pesticides. And more than 80% of all the foods that we are eating are sprayed with pesticides. So for every generation, and there are about 80, an estimated, nobody knows for sure, there's an estimated 80,000 different chemicals in use today. And so we have this toxic mix that's sprayed on our food, the chemicals that are in the air that we're breathing, whether you're in a city or even if you're in the country. And so it is a matter of avoiding taking in more chemicals and getting more of them out, detoxifying, which I'll talk a little bit about later. But each generation since World War II is carrying a heavier toxic load. The baby inherits the mother's load, and then in their lifetime they add their own toxic load. And so we have all of these generations since World War II, and in autism what's happening is the babies are really small body weight, and they have immature systems for throwing off toxins and for handling all of this. And so they're getting a toxic load that prevents them from functioning correctly. And that's why they're like the canaries in the coal mine. They're showing us that we've reached toxic levels in our country that small infants cannot handle this. And so it's up to the mothers to try and detoxify as best they can if you are planning a pregnancy, but also try to avoid giving your children foods that have been sprayed with chemicals or that been made with chemicals.
I'm also avoiding giving my husband food with chemicals since he recently finished chemo.
Oh, well, that's a good thing too.
Can't help it when he sneaks out of the house and gets what he wants, so. What can parents do to help reduce attention deficit disorder?
Okay, there are several things that you can do to help anyone who has attention deficit. And the first thing starts with food again. Eat three small meals a day and 2 snacks. Part of the attention deficit, and I had attention deficit as part of bipolar too, it's commonly part of it. Part of that is when your body is low in fuel, then you will start to feel anxious and you won't be able to focus very well. So you need to have small meals and 2 snacks to keep the fuel flowing to the brain throughout the day, so that you can always have access to fuel and don't run out and get to this state where you can't focus. The other thing is children especially, and adults somewhat too, need 8 hours of sleep at least every night. And the best way is to put kids to bed at the same time every night so that their body gets used to falling asleep at that time, and then make sure that it's 8 hours before they have to get up so that they're getting adequate amounts of sleep. You know how if you have insomnia, the next day you're always foggy brained? You can't seem to think of anything, and you can't do things right, and you're really not able to focus. that's what's happening with sleep-deprived kids too. Limit television and video time to 2 hours a day. This is really not good for children. It's part of our culture, and so the best, and you want them to have some of the stimulation that comes from internet and from some of the good sides of that, but just don't let it get out of hand. And 1 hour of physical exercise, preferably when they get home from school, so that they have time to get oxygen into their bodies and into their brains before they try to do homework, or they'll sleep a lot better later that night too. So if attention deficit is severe, you really need to find a holistic practitioner. I recommend naturopathic doctors and have them work to determine what nutrient deficiencies the child has and address those.
Do you use energy medicines?
We already did
Oh,
that
we
one.
did that one. You were right.
Okay,
On to another page. Okay, here we go. What can older people do to prevent Alzheimer's, dementia?
And are there supplements? No.
Yes.
No, there are no
yeah.
supplements that really prevent memory loss or Alzheimer's or dementia yet. I'm not saying there never will be, but none of the drugs have worked. But there are certain, and I have a higher risk of Alzheimer's because of the years of depression and bipolar. Anyone who's had severe depression for a lot of years is a 30% higher risk of Alzheimer's. So I've looked into this for my own Alzheimer's prevention. And the number one thing that it tops the list is to lower stress levels, the person's stress levels. And why is that? Because when you're stressed, your body produces adrenaline. Now we all know that if we're in an accident or if a bull is charging us, we make adrenaline to help us fight or flight. It's a part of the body that produces these stress hormones to enable us to get away should our life be threatened. So it's very primitive, built into the system forever. And what happens is when your body makes adrenaline and the stress hormone cortisol, it closes down your digestive system and non-essential things to fighting or getting away. So the systems that aren't needed to help preserve your life are closed down, and all your energy goes to help you escape the danger. Then later, when you're safe and the body wants to bring itself back into balance, it injects insulin into your system. And that brings the cortisol and stress levels down and the insulin in. And this is why people who are under stress all the time gain weight, because insulin is the hunger hormone. It makes you hungry. It makes you want to eat. And every time you put something in your body, insulin will be injected into your system to make sure that you have what you need. Right. And so every time you're under stress, so I see people who are normal weight and they take a stressful job, and I experienced this myself when I was running my PR agency in California. Every year they put on 5 or 10 pounds because they're under stress all the time, and then they're eating quickly because they think they need the food to make them to give them energy, and then they overeat, and then they have more stress, so they get more insulin, so they're more hungry all the time. And so you have to learn to use other ways to control your stress or get out of the stressful situations if you can. And that will, so this, and the next part of this is that if you have diabetes and you have elevated blood sugar, that high sugar makes you have a higher risk for Alzheimer's and dementia, because the high sugar can damage the functions of the brain, constant high sugar. So you need to, so those are some of the basic contributing causes, and you need to improve your blood circulation so that you get lots of blood to the brain and oxygen to the brain. And exercise does that as well. And then the other thing that's a major contributor is toxic metals. And Americans are carrying a huge toxic load. Mercury from eating fish, and mercury is in the water from industrial pollution, mercury PCBs, arsenic, various other things. And so silver dental amalgams are 40% mercury. So all of these things contribute to preventing your brain from functioning right, is this toxic load again. There are antioxidants that you can take and antioxidants foods that you can eat, and I'm going to talk about those in a few minutes with another question.
Okay.
So,
What are some natural remedies to help interstitial cystitis or IC?
anything that ends with itis, arthritis, phlebitis, interstitial cystitis, that means that it's caused by inflammation. So if you just connect it to arthritis, anything with itis means it's an inflammatory caused ailment. So this bladder pain from this cystitis is caused by inflammation. Now, the next part of your investigation, and I talk about using Sherlock's process to figure out what's the cause of this. And it means you do a little research and you figure out what might be the causes, and then you test them sort of one by one. But arthritis is caused by many different things. But a huge one in this country is our diet. Everything goes back to the food. I have been on an anti-inflammatory diet for over 15 years, and it's posted on my website, which is crazyrecovery.com. And what you need to do is the foods that make up most of the American diet are really high in inflammatory producing substances. Meat is very acidic. Your grains are very acidic. So when you have foods that are high in acid, it makes your whole body become more acidic, and that contributes to inflammation. So what you want to do is make your body more alkaline. And what foods bring alkalinity? Plant-based foods, vegetables, lettuces, anything that's grown in the earth is helping alkalize your body. And so I would suggest there is on the web, I didn't know about this cystitis, so I had to look it up. But on the web, if you put in a diet for cystitis or inflammation, and you put holistic remedies for this interstititis, you'll get some websites. The difference is if you don't put in the word holistic or put in natural remedies for interstitial cystitis, then you'll get drugs that are to treat it. And these are not the best choice, because if you want to address the cause that's inside your body, then if you take preventative measures to solve it naturally, then your whole body will get better. Your other arthritis will disappear. It just won't treat the bladder. It will treat your whole body. And so you'll lower your inflammation levels by simply changing what you're eating. And that's the best way to do. There are antioxidants foods. So I'll talk about those right now, since it goes into antioxidants fight inflammation. And here's the leading categories. And some of these you'll know. Purple, red, blue, berries, and grapes. They contain vitamin C and selenium, both of which are antioxidants. Now, selenium, a lot of people aren't familiar with. And this is one of the things that I carry with me when I travel. And the pills are really small. It's a mineral. It comes in small capsules. I get 200 micrograms of it. So because it's a mineral, you don't need lots in my daily multivitamin. But it's a very potent antioxidant, so it brings your inflammation levels down. It's also a very potent antiviral, antibacterial. So if I've been on a plane and I think I'm coming down with a bug of some virus that I might have picked up in a party or on a plane, I take extra of selenium right away. So, but here, it helps to reduce your inflammation because it's an antioxidant. So antioxidants from berries are vitamin C and selenium and resveratrol. Dark green vegetables have vitamin C and vitamin E and vitamin A. They're all antioxidants. Leeks, lettuce, and kale, they have vitamin C and selenium. Sweet potatoes and orange vegetables have vitamin C, A, and those are antioxidants, and potassium and lots of fiber. Nuts have really healthy fats, which a lot of people know, but they also have the antioxidant resveratrol. And resveratrol is an important antioxidant because it helps protect your DNA from mutating. So it's a cancer preventative, and it's an anti-mutagenic antioxidant. So it's really important, and you get it from nuts. And how much easier could that be? Tree nuts. Not necessarily pecans, because they're not peanuts, because they're a legume, but tree nuts. Pecans, walnuts, and hazelnuts have the highest antioxidants. Brazil nuts have the most selenium, but it also has antioxidants. And then the last thing that people are surprised is that tea has antioxidants called catechins, and they help block cellular damage too. And so tea is often recommended as a drink for people who are fighting cancer because of the antioxidants, specific ones in tea. Okay, so let's take the next question.
Okay, what are the best natural supplements for joint, bone pain, or inflammation?
Okay, so I've talked about the foods for inflammation. Now these are just the supplements, because sometimes if you're fighting cancer, or if you're doing prevention of mental illness like I'm 67 years old, and I'm already taking antioxidants to prevent Alzheimer's. So I take vitamin C, I get E, and I get A in my multivitamin. I use curcumin, which is also the same as the herb turmeric.
Okay.
They're the same thing. And you can get curcumin in a supplement form, and you can sometimes get it in a multi antioxidant that has curcumin and resveratrol together in the same supplement. And I take both of those antioxidants. Ubiquinol is more commonly known as coenzyme Q10, but this is a specific form of CoQ10, and that's a very potent antioxidant. It also strengthens the heart muscle. So if you have heart issues, you want to be taking CoQ10 daily. Melatonin is a sleep hormone that your body naturally produces when you sleep. Those of us who don't produce enough of it sometimes I use liquid drops of melatonin to help me sleep longer sometimes. And they're natural, they have no side effects in most people, and flight attendants and pilots and other people that go through time zones often use melatonin. But what they don't know is it's a very good antioxidant too. So it helps prevent oxidation of your tissues in your body and aging, in other words. So those are some of the supplements that you can use in addition to foods.
And melatonin also doesn't give you that druggy hangover.
That's right, but if you take too much of it, you can be sleepy.
Oh,
so
yeah.
if you're sleepy in the morning when you've used melatonin, just back off the dose a little bit, and so that you wake up, and it should leave your system pretty quickly. And so, next.
The next question is my life. What are the most common food allergies?
Well, what's becoming most common in this country is the gluten. There's 10 years ago when I discovered that I was gluten intolerant. I live in Connecticut. I had to order my gluten-free foods from New Jersey, from a bakery there, and order a month's supply. Mm-hmm. Now I can go into my grocery store and I can see racks of gluten-free foods. But just because they're gluten-free doesn't mean they're healthy.
No.
So be picky about what gluten-free you eat too. You still want it to be whole grain. You still want it to be low in sugar. You still want it to be a healthy form of carbohydrates, not just all processed and very synthetic. So wheat gluten allergy tops everything in the country. Dairy comes number 2, being sensitive to dairy products. Corn is a big one, and corn is in everything. So if you have a corn allergy, you have to really limit your intake. Corn syrup is everywhere. Chocolate is the 4th leading food allergy. And
dark chocolate?
It just says chocolate. It didn't specify. But, dark chocolate is a relatively new demand item. It didn't used to be. We used to all just eat Mars chocolate of any kind. And now we are going for the dark chocolate if we can, if we have the chance. But a lot of people are just allergic to chocolate or the caffeine that's in the chocolate. Sugar is another big allergy. I was allergic to sugar. I was able to turn that allergy off, I was able to turn off the allergy to lettuce. I had 12 or 13 different allergies at one time, and some of them I could turn off, and they stayed turned off using an energy medicine approach, an energetic approach. But the gluten turned itself back on a couple of times, so I just gave up and I avoided gluten. Peanuts is another big allergen, and for people who have blood type A, they often are allergic to plants that are all in the nightshade family, which includes potatoes, tomatoes, peppers, and eggplants. So those are the top allergens in this country.
And with celiac, which is the gluten allergy, mm-hmm. a lot of patients are triggered by soy.
Okay. Well, that wasn't in this
biggie.
list, but I think you're right. That's another one to add to it. And the other thing about soy is I know a lot of vegans and vegetarians use it for as a protein source, but I want to caution them to use other protein sources as well, because too much soy inhibits your thyroid function. So if you're only using soy as your primary source of protein, you can be inhibiting your thyroid. And the thyroid gland is your thermostat for your whole body. So if your thyroid is low, you're going to be cold all the time. And if your body temperature is low, you're not going to digest things properly, because the enzymes all require a certain temperature. They work within a certain temperature range, optimized. So if you're using soy as a protein, or if you're allergic to soy, add in pea or bean and other sources of protein that are amino acid derived, plant-based sources. I like a mix. You can use a whey if you don't have milk issues. You can use peas, beans, nuts. So I say, I'm not saying don't use soy, I'm saying be cautious with soy.
Definitely.
Okay.
Okay, let's see. Can mental, emotional trauma be healed?
Yes, it can. And I'm really happy to answer that question, because a lot of people think that it's only inherited, or it's can't be dealt with. PTSD can be healed, but with soldiers who's been in the war, they need to combine the treatment. And the best treatment for all of this trauma is emotional freedom technique, which is an energy medicine. And it's so quick, and it's so effective, and it's so easy that it's been adopted by the conventional medicine, because they saw in the aftermath of 9/11, the first responders that were treated with that were much better off. So what you want to do, what happens in trauma is that the brain waves can get out of pattern. It's so traumatic that your brain sort of freezes up, and your brainwave patterns, healthy patterns, sometimes freeze or get stuck in an unhealthy pattern due to the trauma. And so the emotional freedom technique can address that, but it also, sometimes it's like the trauma gets stuck in the cellular level of the body. And so the emotional freedom technique helps to pull that out. With veterans of war, you also need to do physical detoxification to get the nerve gases and to get all of the toxins that are used in munitions out of the individual's system as well, because that is contributing to their depression along with the trauma. Trauma is anything from war, incest, rape, horrible accidents, anything that traumatizes the individual. And it may not be for those first responders, it wasn't necessarily their personal trauma, it was witnessing such horrible trauma. And it became part of their memories, lodged in their memory too. So hypnotherapy can release, access and release these deep emotions. Homeopathy has been known, and these traumas can frequently result in someone being diagnosed as bipolar. That's not uncommon, following a rape or incest as well. So trauma can be repressed. People may not even remember it. But through these energy medicine, it can be accessed. Through hypnotherapy, it can be accessed. You can use brainwave optimization, which there's different computerized versions that help correct your brainwaves once they get out of balance. Neurofeedback will do the same thing. And some people also find relief through prayer and through meditation, and through helping serve others. Something that takes you out of yourself and you put others in front of you, and it helps give you a sense of peace and giving and helping. So those are all treatments for trauma that have proved to help many people. And so just because you've been traumatized doesn't mean that you can't get well. You can, but it will be a process. And first you have to admit that there's a problem, and then find someone who specializes in helping traumatic, getting rid of trauma, and then go through the process. So, yes.
What is the emotional freedom technique?
This is a technique that came out of, we've got about 5 minutes left, so this will be my last question. I'll answer it.
From this?
From this, yeah.
Yes.
Emotional freedom technique was developed by a researcher in California, a woman who, on her way walking to work, she noticed that when her eyes, there were leaves, it was fall, and there were leaves blowing across the path. And when her eyes swept back and forth across the path, looking out for that she didn't slip on the leaves, that her own anxiety lifted. And so she took that little clue and, being a researcher, figured out that it was a dual process, and it was accessing trauma in a way that rational talk therapy could never do. And when they're doing emotional freedom technique, I'll just demonstrate on the table. The practitioner will have you follow their finger as they move it across your eye, and follow it with your eyes, and then they will tap on your arm or on your knee or some part of your body, and that creates in the body a dual focus. And somehow, and I'm not sure that anybody really knows how, that dual focus then allows deeply buried trauma to come up. And so the practitioners are frequently psychotherapists who then, once something emerges and you start to talk about it, then you can address something that may have been so buried that you didn't even know about it. And you didn't know that this trauma had been causing this symptom all of these years. And so using a therapist, you can use this process to bring up deeply buried things that the rational mind could not access. Because sometimes when you're so traumatized, the body closes that off from your memory as a survival defense. And so it's the body protecting you. But in some stages, it's better then, when you're safe, to let it come out and to process it with the help of the therapist. And so that's what I recommend in my books for any trauma.
Well, thank you.
Well, it's been nice to have this time with you. Thank you so much for collecting these questions and conveying them to me. And I really appreciate, we have an audience here today, and we'll show you a picture of them as we're going off with this show. There will be another show tomorrow night at the same time. And so we hope that you'll join us. We will have a different list of questions. And if you have, but we're going to be taping that show today too. So all the questions are in, I'm sorry to say. But if you have questions, you can submit them to our Facebook page. Lois will get them and I will answer them online. And I believe that these videotapes of these two shows, once they've been aired, will also be on Facebook and they'll be on YouTube. So you can look for them putting in Gracelyn and Restoring Health Holistically.
They will also be on your new webpage.
And the new webpage. And what's the
Yes.
title of that one?
Holistic Healing with Gracelyn Guyol.
Okay,
Right
great.
now we do not have her last name on, but we're adding it.
Great. So we're still a work in progress on
Yeah.
some of these things. I'm not Facebook savvy, so she's my savior.
My pleasure.
Thank you again for joining us, and we'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow evening. Good night.